and welcome everybody to this month's edition of The Wellness Policy. My name is Ting, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Jordan Goodman. Hey, Jordan.
Hey, yes, I don't have a cowbell. I am in South Florida right now. I have a ukulele instead.
Ooh, lovely. What is that?
I believe that might be. I think a G would be this. I just Googled a couple chords. This might be a C. We're learning down by the beach. I just bought Limp Bizkit tickets this morning,
That's amazing. And I'm just trying to it's a great way to start the show, Jordan, because people might think that Jordan just made a wisecrack, a joke, but in fact, no. He's a big Limp Bizkit fan, and we've had conversations about Limp Bizkit in 2022 and this current resurgence that they've had. And tell us, why the decision to tell us about the Limp Bizkit resurgence of 2022.
So in my other podcast, Community Chocolate Croissants, this was something I was predicting as early as 2017. I was calling that the year of Limp Bizkit would be 2020. Obviously, the pandemic interfered, so we're actually right on time with my cultural predictions there. But not unlike wrestling had a big boom in the late 90s, and in the past few years, we have seen a resurgence as well. Many cultural movements have 20-year life cycles. Many are very cyclical. And we've seen this happening in pop punk and emo, and why not nu metal? Limp Bizkit is back, baby.
You were, I think, showing me some videos from their, Lollapalooza performance, and I definitely have a level of respect for the band that I think went underappreciated for quite a number of those 20 years. So I'm very excited for you.
I appreciate it. Yeah, honestly, I haven't had much interest in well over 20 years. There's something nostalgic about it, but I like the fact that the band is in on the joke that is Limp Bizkit.
Okay, very interesting. Well, we are not here to talk about Limp Bizkit. We can, for a future edition of the Wellness Policy, dedicate an entire episode to nu metal. But what are we here to talk about? And who are we here to talk to, Jordan?
We have a guest, someone that I met fairly recently for the first time, someone that I've noticed on Twitter, honestly, someone in the wrestling community, someone who has been a pro wrestler himself, but very much having daily conversation online about things like mental health, someone that seems very committed to spreading awareness about mental health within the pro wrestling community. So I DM'd him, said, hey man, I think we have a couple things in common. Let's hop on FaceTime and get to know each other. And a couple months later, here we are. His name is Jaxon Stone. Jaxon, welcome to the Wellness Policy.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Our relationship is fairly recent, Jordan. So I'm happy that we connected, and I'm pumped to be on the show. So appreciate you guys having me.
How great is the internet? We can just reach out to anyone and connect with them.
It's incredible. Yeah. I was going to say, before we start, do you have a favorite Limp Bizkit song, Jaxon?
Oh, I don't know any of their songs.
And you're better off for it, I bet. Jaxon,
I think didn't they have one song that was like a WrestleMania theme? Did they? Is that a thing?
Oh, My Way, of course. They've had several.
So those are the songs I know, but until now I couldn't tell you that was the band that sang that.
Listen, we've got My Way, we've got Rollin', we've got Crack Addict. Okay, I'm betting you're more of a Limp Bizkit fan than you think.
Well, then I might be a fan then. So excuse me.
We can change the topic of the show right now. So Jaxon, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are?
Sure. So I guess I've been a professional wrestler since about 2015. I think I'm kind of coming to the tail end of my active wrestling career. Before the pandemic hit, I was wrestling about 4 days a week as an independent professional wrestler. And then some of the stuff that I was trying to do on the side turned into what I was doing full time because wrestling was kind of halted at the moment. And so I was doing this thing called You Are Loved, which was I was basically a mental health movement it started as. And I was posting weekly videos on YouTube. I was having conversations with people about their mental health, their journey, their struggles, and how they're overcoming and being resilient through that. I was also having some of those same conversations on my podcast. And then, wrestling actively stopped for me. And so I pushed that You Are Loved into more than a movement. It became a nonprofit organization. And now we're kind of building those services outside of wrestling, but I'm really interested in building structures and systems and communication inside of at least the independent professional wrestling network. So very straightforwardly, we can stop losing people that we love to one, suicide, drugs, things of that nature. We can't save everyone. That's impossible. And I can't believe that to be true, or else that'll weigh me down and spiral me out of control. But I can believe, and I do believe, that we can save and help more people than are being helped now. And so it's kind of a general overlook about what's happening in my life right now. I also do some coaching with some clients and things of that nature. As I mentioned, I have a podcast, but mostly the 90% of my life is centered around mental health and You Are Loved and running that nonprofit.
What prompted you to start You Are Loved in the first place?
Yeah, good question. It's a very personal story, and so I'll definitely share that with you guys now. But so my professional wrestling name is Jaxon Stone, but my real name is Aaron Mashkitz, and I have a big sister. Her name was Rachel, and she battled severe depression and bipolar disorder, borderlining on schizophrenia for about 11 plus years. And she lost her battle. And September of 2018, she died by suicide. And so I'm sure people listening, maybe they haven't gone through that specific experience, but they've gone through something painful. They've lost something super fucking challenging. Excuse me, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse.
Yes,
has
you are. Yeah.
happened in their life. Everyone's gone through that sort of really tough situation. And when that happens, we start to reevaluate everything in our life. We tend to think that we get punched in the face about how fragile and precious life is, and we reorganize everything that our life is. And that's the moment that I started to reorganize my entire life. And I took a super deep journey into my own mental health, into my own grief. And when I needed it the most, You Are Loved, those 3 words popped up onto my feed, onto my social media, in my brain more often than I'm not. And it was a nice reminder. Maybe I didn't believe it all the time, but it was a nice reminder to see that. And now I do believe that in my whole heart and spirit, that you are loved. Everyone is loved. I'm loved. You're loved. I don't care how cheesy it sounds. It's actually the true 3 words that saved my life. And so, yeah, it started really off a t-shirt. I created a t-shirt, and I was wrestling a lot at the time. I was living in Philadelphia. I was actually living with Wheeler Yuta, so shout out to him for getting slapped by William Regal last night. But yeah, he helped me with that and made a t-shirt, and we sold a lot of t-shirts, and that transitioned into me learning a lot about mental health and psychology and philosophy and personal development, and reorganizing my life and how I wanted to present myself as a professional wrestler. And if I wanted to still be a professional wrestler, if that was something I could do and talk about feelings and emotions and being vulnerable and also pretending to be like a macho guy in the ring, do those 2 things coincide? How does that bridge work? How do I figure that out? And so the t-shirt turns into conversation, turns into stories, turns into me talking about it on Twitter and Instagram constantly, turned into now a fully functioning, nonprofit. We had our first fundraiser last week in Dallas. It was quite amazing. Yeah, that's how it happened, and that's where I'm at now.
Because we are a pro wrestling podcast network, I think, that aspect of it all is probably what interests me the most, at least. And I'm very curious, like, when you perhaps, before you decided to bring this up amongst your fellow professional wrestlers, what was sort of like the sense of discussion and awareness around mental health, and how was it met?
You mean when I started talking about it?
Yeah, yeah. How aware were people about it, and how receptive were they to some of your thoughts and conversations?
For the majority of people that I've spoken to and responded to some of the things that I post has been positive. I got some messages very early on. It hasn't happened in a couple of years from some people that I would wrestle for, some promoters that would message me and tell me that they can't use me anymore because I no longer seem like a credible fighter because I'm too talking about love and empathy and emotion and mental health. And I think we've seen that switch, at least on social media in our wrestling community, maybe because of the speaking out movement, maybe because of COVID, maybe because of all of these things that keep hitting our community so damn hard, and the people that we keep losing. Like the conversation on social media has definitely changed, and I'm usually received in a very positive light. But where I see the issue is it's not transferring into like action. And so we're still caught up in wanting to tweet something that's like might get a few likes and people will respond well and check in on your friends and all of these things. But we're not acting like that in day-to-day life when people come to us and they need us, and we have to be willing to sit in that dark spot with them. We have to hold ourselves accountable, all of these things that are much more important, I would say, than just tweeting out something. And so it starts with, social media awareness and presence about a very serious topic, but it has to transfer into action, and it has to transfer into how we treat each other at shows. Like, what systems are in place? Is there communication there? Is there a place for someone to reach out to when they're feeling like this? What happens when they lose their job or their car is flat? Like, how do they still get bookings? Is there something that they can go to? Is there funds? Is there a phone number? Is there all of these things that we can set up as the real type of action that's like practical, instead of just like trying to be about it on social media, but like being about it in real life? And so, to circle back to your initial question, most of the time I'm received very positively on the internet, but that doesn't really matter unless we're doing it in real life. And so that's really what matters to me. And I see that a lot. Like, when I go to shows, people do talk to me about these things, and that's awesome. And I'm trying to set up, systems. I got a few people that are working with me and helping me on this kind of path. Thank you guys for letting me share about it too. And so, yeah, so far that's kind of the consensus around it.
So Jaxon, while you were actively performing, and the perception, at least, that maybe some of these hesitant promoters were getting from, was it so much from maybe your social media interaction, or were you starting to bring these elements of mental health awareness into the actual performance and fiction of your character, or storylines or performances playing out at these shows?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So at the time that my sister passed away, my character that I was presenting was lights, camera, Jaxon. So I was basically pretending to be a movie star, and all my social media feeds were very curated and they were pretend, and nothing that I posted was real. And that was actually quite challenging. I feel like I was pretty good at it, and it was kind of fun for what it was. The Miz was my favorite wrestler, so I guess you can see why I chose that. But anyways, and then, that event happened, and then I started posting these things while trying to go to shows and still be this like pretend heel character. And it really started to weigh on me. Like, it really started to make me feel like not good. It started actually to make me feel like a piece of shit. Like, even though I wasn't meaning to be mean, that was like kind of my role. It was not, I was just having a really challenging time, like going to shows and trying to work this character, and then coming, and being at my house or my apartment and talking about these things. And it just started to conflict, like internally, like really deeply. And then I think that's when I started getting some of these messages, because I was altering the way I would carry myself at shows. I was having deeper conversations with fans. I wasn't able to really get into this heel mode that I was before. And so, yeah, I think it came off of that. And then I now when I wrestle, I just am basically, I mean, I have trunks that say "You are loved" on the back. I mean, I don't know. It's like I just go out there and I wrestle now, and so because I only wrestle really at one place, and all the fans really know who I am, and we have a deep relationship in that way. But off the top, like 2018, 2019, before kind of COVID, yeah, it was like a really challenging, conflicting transition for me to like always be this like pretend character and then post this stuff online and then have that battle there. So I just dropped all of that lights, camera, Jaxon stuff. And that was tough because that was what was getting me all my bookings. That was my character. That was my whatever. And so it was a challenging transition into trying to get the same bookings while not being the same persona, but trying to be just like this real person who cares about this subject, who cares about you, but also trying to mesh into like this pretend world of professional wrestling. It's very challenging to try to intermingle like real fucking life and what you're trying to present to pretend entertainment art. And so that was hard for me, but that's probably kind of why I've gotten away from actively performing all the time, but I still love professional wrestling, hence why I'm trying to do all this work in it. And so it means a lot to me.
It's so amazing to me that like in 2018, 2019, 2020, like promoters can still have that attitude where the person behind the character has to somehow create a congruent persona off screen, out of the ring, as the inside. When I mean, it's just like nobody bats an eye if some supervillain in a movie promotes some sort of mental health advocacy on their social media, and then plays an Avengers villain, for instance. So it seems so silly that they're putting you on a much smaller scale than an Avengers movie to that same standard. Has that changed in your opinion, and just the overall acceptance of these sort of conversations being able to occur?
Yeah, I'm thinking about your point, like a lot about the Avengers movie before I kind of answer your question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to figure out why that would be. Is it because like we're like people see us in real life?
Yeah.
So
well,
it's
wrestling existed in a really strange space where I think, at least I think it's changing among the fan base, but at least like maybe amongst people that are a bit more old school, they believe that, the best characters are the ones that live it 24/7. And I'm kind of curious from you, like, in dealing with so many professional wrestlers, like, does that take a mental toll, in having to maintain, essentially, method acting, that's encouraged 24 hours a day in this business?
That was extremely exhausting. Extremely. Like when I finally like sat down to think about my character and what I wanted to present on shows in real life and how I wanted to completely align, I was like, man, this is like exhausting trying to pretend to be this character 100% of the time on social media. I feel like I couldn't, like if I was just going to do something that a movie star per se wouldn't do, am I allowed to post this picture with my buddy and we're going to go get some froyo? Like, is that cool? Like, do people post that? Am I allowed to post that I have like laundry to do in my house, but I don't have a maid that does it because that's not what you know what I mean? It's like super exhausting not being able to like literally be your authentic self. And that falls right into mental health. Like if we can't express our truest version, our most genuine version of ourselves, it gets really exhausting and it takes a toll on our mental health. And so I know there's kind of this tug of war in wrestling because you kind of have to be this character. You kind of have to present yourself a little bit larger than life because you are in an entertainment space. And I get that. But we should be able to pull back from that a little bit and be ourselves and be genuine and show up authentically when the camera's not on social media, all of these things. That's wildly important for our mental health. If we can't pull away from that character, then that's when we kind of fall into these really dark holes of drugs and alcohol and trying to be this person all of the time, every day, and never wanting to be our real self, because that's what the scary part of it is. And so it's exhausting. And when I was able to take a look and actually look at it from a different perspective, I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to, like, I don't know, show that I have a shitty 2006 Nissan Altima. Like, that's fine. I love my car. It gets me from point A to B, whatever the case is, right? That is what it is. And so I think it's important to be able to express that in a real, genuine, vulnerable way. And I think those types of characters who have that stuff mixed in with their larger than life character are the best ones, because they have that sense of realness. They have that genuineness, the authenticity that they're presenting on camera, but it's like a little bit amplified. I think, what I don't really know much, but that's what I think to be true.
Jaxon, would you say that more, let's say, traditional kayfabe approach was something that you just assumed was the right way to go initially, or did you have trainers and or mentors that were really stressing that for you?
When I got into wrestling, I only knew that WWE existed. And so when I would watch WWE, I saw characters. I saw people that were they were characters. So I said, okay, when I get into wrestling, I'm going to create a character. And so I never fell into like this kayfabe type deal. But when I do something, I just go all in. So I went all in on my character. But there are these like weird wrestling paradigms that like I don't understand why they exist. So I did fall into that trap a little bit when I started seeing indie shows and going all these things and doing all these things. But originally it was just because that's what I saw and that's what I knew. And that's what I felt like worked, because my goal in wrestling, from the very first time I started, was to be in WWE and all that stuff. It's not my goal anymore. If it is still your goal, amazing. I hope you make it. But it's not for me. And so that whole switch came at the same time as everything else. But there are just like, because I came from a sports background too, and some of the things that you would do in a sports world like aren't acceptable in a professional wrestling sense, even though you're still trying to perform and be excellent and climb the ladder. And like there's like these weird paradigms of like things that aren't okay, but sort of okay, but some people can get away with it, but then you shouldn't do this and you should do this. And then it's like, it's very confusing even talking about it, as you can hear me probably. But yeah, so I kind of moved past those old wrestling things pretty quickly. But
in working with or hosting these groups with a number of professional wrestlers, I'm curious if there are any perhaps common issues that pro wrestlers may face.
So yeah, let me kind of backtrack a little bit about that question. So with my nonprofit, which is called You Are Loved, our main area of focus is support groups. So when my sister passed away, that's immediately what I got into, and finding, words like You Are Loved and finding support groups, like-minded people, was basically the two things that saved my life. I'm still in the same support group now that I was originally when I got into it in 2018. They're also suicide loss survivors. So they understand some of, 15 years in their grief journey, some 6 months. And so support group changed my life, saved my life. And so when I started this nonprofit, I felt, okay, support groups seem like a really good idea. And so I have a couple of support groups that are geared towards just general population, and I have a few therapists that run those groups. And then I found a couple professional wrestlers. One is a manager and one's an actual professional wrestler who also licensed mental health therapists. So I asked them to run these groups. And I'm not a part of these groups. I just facilitate the times, the dates, and the Zoom links. And then they handle the sessions, because I do know quite a bit about mental health and I do work with clients, but I'm not a licensed therapist. And I want that to be made very clear. Those people are, that's why they're running the groups, dealing with very severe and important mental health struggles. And so, but what I do know based on your question, so that's like the most important service that we do are those support groups. And those happen once every 4 weeks. There's 2 specific professional wrestling support groups, and they have about 20 people in each group. And we have about, depending on the week, about half of those show up to each group. And so with the fundraiser that I just ran, I'm hoping to extend my network of therapists so we can run more groups more frequently. And so there's more available communication and support and ways for and some more structures for professional wrestlers. So that's like the main thing. But based on your question, what we see the most is that professional wrestling is the thing that saved the wrestler's life, and also the thing that is destroying their mental health the most. So it's a very, very, very challenging piece, because if everyone who's a wrestling fan or a wrestler or anyone involved in professional wrestling can just pick a time and date and maybe not a specific show, but a time and date where professional wrestling pulled them out of a dark place. And that's so fucking beautiful. And that we can all come together on that. Like, no matter who I talk to, you love professional wrestling. There's a moment in time you can say that match, that wrestler, that tweet, that show, that event, whatever it is, was saved me. I decided to live, or I decided to keep going, or I decided to do this because of that show. And that's magical, right? We have to really hold that in tight. But then when you start becoming a wrestler, you sort of lose that fandom, because it becomes more of a job. And then there's the anxiety that kicks in, the travel, the lack of sleep, not seeing your family, the depression that kicks in, the competition, the imposter syndrome, the body dysmorphia. All of these things start to stack up. And the thing that you loved the most, the thing that pulled you out of the darkest thing, the thing that you were, when you were 4 years old and you were getting bullied, I'm going to be a fucking pro wrestler one day, and that's pulling me out of this moment, is now the same thing that is causing you the most stress and anxiety in the world. And so that's kind of the bridge that we're trying to tackle most often with the people that come to these support groups, and how to give them some of these coping strategies, how to understand what resources are available. Just talking to like-minded people who understand their exact situation is super important. Because off that point, when I started running these groups initially, the ones specifically for professional wrestlers, I had a couple therapists that were not in the professional wrestling community. And so we spent the bulk of these sessions trying to explain what professional wrestling is and why it's such a challenging profession. And that took away from supporting and giving coping strategies to the people that needed it. And so now that the therapists are very in line, they understand exactly what it takes and what's going on inside the world of professional wrestling, we can really get to this like meat and bones of this like tug of war that's happening between or inside the professional wrestler. And I think just gearing them up with some tools, building their mental health toolkit so that they can develop these things when they're not in a crisis. And then when they maybe do get in a crisis, they have some things to fall into immediately that they know they can use, and they know they're okay. And they have a group to contact or a person to text, or they know that in 2 weeks they're going to be able to meet with this group and all of this stuff. And so there's just there's always some light at the end of the tunnel. There's always like a little bit of hope. And then there's some like practical, actionable tools packed in that they've gone over with the therapist. But that big tug of war is really, really a complex kind of thing to deal with. That all, in my experience, maybe not all, but most professional wrestlers deal with, at least at the independent level. I don't know at any of the other levels. I haven't spoken to those people at length to know that information. But yeah.
I really resonated with a lot of what you said. I spent much of my late teens and early 20s mostly focused professionally on being a musician. And there's certainly a lot of similarities just between the performance aspect, but also the business aspect of musicians and wrestlers, entertainment. But I was also the one running the business of my band, not unlike most wrestlers, are the ones running their own business as an independent pro wrestler. And especially into my early 20s, like I was starting to hate it. It felt like work. Even just touring and performing was physically demanding to the point my body was hurting. And it just, the thing, to your words, like the thing that saved my life and that I loved the most was also the thing that was causing the most stress, to the point where I took a couple years off of doing that. But I guess the lesson that I learned from that was when I started working with Ring of Honor when I was in my early 30s. I went into the job with a fierce protection of my love and fandom of pro wrestling. I knew it was a job, which meant there was going to be a lot of stress. It was going to be hard and difficult and unfair and challenging at times. But I went into it knowing that if I feel like my love of pro wrestling would be at jeopardy because I'm working within it, then that would be a good signal for me to either do something different or to get out completely. And while Ring of Honor was really awesome, it was also very difficult and frustrating and disappointing in many ways. But one of the things that I feel most proud of is that once I left, I definitely did not become less of a fan. If anything, I fell more in love with pro wrestling. So I'm really glad that you shared that, Jaxon. And kind of to that point, I also learned that just cutting my teeth playing in bands, I developed a lot of skills. I mean, I learned how to run a business and how to be a performer and how to be a publicist and a booking agent and all these different things. And it seems like a lot of the skills that you learned as a working professional wrestler, you're now able to leverage those skills and use those skills to help build a nonprofit and to help build community around these things. And at least for myself, I noticed that a lot of musicians around me didn't actually take advantage or even become aware of the ways in which their musical experiences have given them like such an edge with experience and skills that they can apply with anything in life. So I guess my question for you is if you're able to maybe speak a bit more to the particular skills that you feel like have been more translatable for you from being a pro wrestler to other things in life. And if maybe that's something that you've also noticed amongst other pro wrestlers. You know, most pro wrestlers, they're not going to do that for the entirety of their career, which means that they're going to have to end up doing something else. But I'm wondering if you've maybe seen something similar where those pro wrestlers don't realize that the experiences that they've had and the skills they developed may actually be the things that can help them get ahead in other fields.
Yeah, I think a lot of wrestlers don't realize the utility of all the skills they've developed. Absolutely. Right. The one of the things I see most often with wrestlers is how creative they are, you know, and how their art is not only like you don't have to just be an artist in the ring. Like all your video packages, your pictures, your tweets, all of that stuff is translatable in any other domain. And there's at least one other thing that you love in this, maybe not as much as pro wrestling, but maybe you like, you know, you really like turtles and that's a community that you want to get invested in. And so you want to create some content around that and you want to join a group there, right? So, and then like wrestlers don't realize that they're willing to drive 15 hours to go to a show just to shake a promoter's hand. Like, do you understand the dedication that takes? And so why wouldn't you do that in any other area of your life that you're deeply invested in? You know, again, maybe you're interested in one other thing. Maybe you need like a shoot job for, you know, Monday through Thursday just to get you through. Okay. How much effort are you going to put into that so you can do the thing that you ultimately want to do? Those skills are transferable. That commitment, that dedication to something larger than you is unbelievable. And most people don't have that. And so that's a lot of the skills that I took away. And I mean, I mostly learned them in baseball because I played baseball up until college. And then those skills were easily transferable into pro wrestling. And then all of the same things now, like wrestlers all the time will message, you know, 15 promoters a day. Great. I did the same thing when I started trying to get donations for my nonprofit. And yes, I was a little bit scared because asking for money is really hard. And asking to be booked on a show is also really hard. Because what if they don't answer? What if they say no? Well, what if they say yes? And so that skill is easily transferable. And that helped me with getting donations, right? Which is a huge thing for a nonprofit. So all of these skills, being able to, building relationships, like being in the car with someone for 12 hours and literally getting to know them and having conversations is the same way you would build a relationship with anyone outside of that. And so all of these skills are quite beautiful. And that's why it's like, to your point, Jordan, to like sort of have some hobbies and interests outside of wrestling that can keep your motor turning when you do step in the professional wrestling space. Because we kind of want to be harmoniously passionate and slightly obsessive about something, but still have those other interests that keep us fired up for when we do get to this, like our number one wildly important goal. But like, I always use turtles as an example because people think it's kind of weird and it's kind of funny, but I think it's great. My mom used to collect little turtles and they were like everywhere in our house and they were super cute. And so I say, if you really like turtles, you should, I guarantee you there's a community on Facebook that is all about turtles, and they'll be the most welcoming community there ever. And they're probably just like have these sweet videos and like these cool, like National Geographic photos that'll be like wildly sweet. And so you can explore some of those other interests because they will feed your ultimate interest of professional wrestling. They will just give you more domains of interest. They'll give you more creative ideas. They'll give you more things to play with, to talk about, more people who can support you or follow you or buy your merchandise. It's all of these things that are super, super cool and transferable skills in all your domains of life.
You mentioned those skills acquired in terms of creativity, in terms of entrepreneurship. That's on top of having to maintain your physical state, of having to train to be a technical professional wrestler, and to be able to publicly speak. So it's an incredibly difficult art form, and I applaud anybody who attempts it, including yourself. I want to talk a little bit about perhaps your opinions on social media. We briefly touched on it earlier, but to say like maybe the wrestling fans' relationship with the wrestler and their relationship on social media. Especially I think more so now than ever, it feels more tense than ever. I'm just curious what your opinion is on it, and if you have a personal way that you would like to navigate, perhaps, or bridge those two relationships.
Well, I have to say to start that my relationship with social media is incredible. So I'm coming from that place. Like, I haven't gotten mean tweets. No one says any horrible shit to me. I don't know if I'm just like really lucky, or people think or just ignored me, or they like actually think what I'm saying is like genuine, which it is. But like, so that I'm coming from that place. So I've never been, no one's tried to cancel me, none of that stuff. And so I don't know exactly how someone feels when they're going through that situation, because I haven't exactly been in there. I've been by someone's side. I've supported someone through all those things, especially what happened in the wrestling community a couple of years ago, which we all know. But it's such a challenging question because like it's all very personal.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's all very personal.
Well, let's hear about maybe the way you treat it. How do you look at social media as sort of like as a positive tool rather than something that can consume you negatively?
Well, one, I set timers on my phone for my social media. Very important. I go into social media with a very, very, very specific intention. Mm-hmm. Either I know exactly what I'm going to post. I post it and then I put my phone away. Or I know that I'm going to go on. This is where I'm going to answer my DMs. This is where I'm going to respond back to people. This is where I'm going to respond back to messages. And then maybe I'll scroll the feed for a little bit to try to get some inspiration. And I've curated my feed enough so that the only things that pop up are, mostly good things. I don't follow the news on Twitter. I don't barely follow any wrestling accounts. I really sometimes don't even know what's happening. And so I've done that to protect my own mental health. And so that when I go on social media and I post something, that's all I do. I post and I ghost, right? And so then just like I do with the work blocks or emails, I do that with DMs as well. And so I use social media in the same way that Jordan mentioned earlier, as a tool for me to connect with people that I would never get to connect with ever. And that's amazing. Not to say that I don't get trapped, right? I do get trapped in the social media scrolling. I do very much get trapped. And then I think to myself 30 minutes later, what was I doing? And then I usually go for a walk to clear my head because I feel like a brain fog after that. But I've set some really clear intentions when I get on social media. And I think it would be wise for others to do the same. And I think we really need to take a breath and a beat before we tweet anything and before we reply to anything. And that would at least help this like stimulus before response. Like the stimulus happens and your response happens. There's a large break and a pause here that we need to really grasp. We need to really, okay, someone said something horrible, or something horrible happened, or this happened, or whatever the case may be, is there's the stimulus. And then there has to be this like beat, this pause, this moment for you to think and digest and, okay, do I need to say something right now? Or should I wait a little bit? Or should I just internally take care of this? Or should I go about this in my real life? What should I do? Okay, then there's the response. Because I think we're really reactive on social media. I think when something happens, we want to be the first to say something. We have to be. Instead of just letting the situation happen, maybe talking to if you know the specific people, talking to those people privately and actually helping the people that are going through it more than just tweeting about it, or just letting it sit and then going to sleep and seeing what happens in the morning. And then maybe that message is deleted because that person regretted what they said, or maybe the situation turned out to be differently than you expected. Or maybe now you can respond in a more elegant, kind, but also assertive manner that gets your point across. And so I think allowing that digestion to happen is super important. And, that could be said about a lot of different things in life, like channeling your response after something stimulating happens, and like being able to take a breath is wildly important. But I think that would help a lot. And then really trying to understand that everyone who tweets, there's a real person there. And if I've learned anything from diving into mental health the last few years, is that people are going through things that you have no idea about. And I know that's stated a lot on social media, but it is really fucking true. And usually they're much more painful than you could ever imagine. And they're very serious, and they feel like they have no one to go to, and their only outlet is social media. And I'm not saying that that's okay, but I am saying that there's a reason behind it, not an excuse, just a reason. And so if we can be that little light, like Mustafa Ali, every time he gets on social media, he's the most beautiful man in the whole world. Mm-hmm. And he responds to things in such an elegant way, and he's still kind, but he's also saying what he means, and he means what he says in a way that's very respectful. And I think we can take a lot from that, because he very much thinks about every word that he types. And I think he's probably the same in real life when he speaks. I don't know, but I would imagine. And so he knows every time he tweets at someone, and that's a real person. And he's saying real things to a real person who's reading it. And that is very important to him. And I think we can take note of that. There's a real person there, probably going through something, maybe alone in their room. Just this is their only solace. This is all they have, is just tweeting these things. And if we can be that little light, just barely, that little light that they can see, they can peek through, and they can bring them out of that, and they can maybe regret what they said. They can apologize. They can circle back to you. Maybe they look at all of these things could potentially happen that are positive, instead of reacting in a way that's harsh. There's nothing good that's going to come out of that. If we can slow that response time down and take a beat and think about what you would want someone to say to you if you were struggling, and say to that person there, or just don't respond. That's also a very, very, very good thing. And so that's what I have to say about that. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, absolutely did. Yeah, very well said.
Yeah, I think very helpful too. So I'm hearing, Jaxon, you got these ongoing regular support groups for not only wrestlers, but others that working within the pro wrestling industry. So clearly we can get more professionals on board, get more pro wrestlers or those involved on board to get more groups and scale that way using a platform like Zoom. But looking forward, whether over the next year or 5 years, I'm curious about what you're envisioning, what you're moving toward. Are you hoping to do some of these either groups or seminars in person? Do you have a certain vision for maybe ways in which you could integrate some of your work with some of the larger wrestling organizations? I'm just curious if there is some sort of North Star that you're kind of inching toward each day right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically I started this Facebook group. So the Facebook group is like a big group. Like it's just like general mental health stuff. I post stuff in there, some articles, some exercises, and it's open to anyone in professional wrestling. And then from there, like AA, it would be peer-led monthly check-in groups. So there'd be like a community leader, and we could do hundreds of these, and there'd be 10 people in each group. And they would all be in a separate group chat based on the Facebook group, and they would meet once a month just to check in, see how things are going. How can we help? What's up? Just, a group. And then they would also have a group chat so they can text regularly, so these people have a place to go to. And then those groups would then lead into the therapist-led groups, which ideally I would like to have one every single Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday throughout the month. Covering each specific is different, and each is covered by a therapist who's also in professional wrestling. So basically, there's 4 a week. For 4 weeks, there'd be 16 sessions that people can go to throughout the month. And so then those are just an hour. Those are with the therapist, and then they have their community check-in groups, and then they have their larger Facebook support groups. So there's like this leveling down of internal communication. There's some structure and there's resources. And then once every other month, like we started doing, we're going to do webinars. So just educational events. You can get some more information on a certain subject. And so that's kind of the plan there. So basically the North Star, the bigger plan is more therapists, more sessions, and more people. And then taking this stuff on the road. So doing mental health, professional wrestling related seminars for companies, for shows, for specific groups of wrestlers, and just traveling to different places, giving them some of this information, maybe over a 1 or 2 day haul, depending on the scale of the company, and then working from top to bottom there through those systems.
And if you want to find more information, you can follow Jaxon Stone at Jaxon, Jaxon Stone _, or you can go to youarelovedlife.com. Jaxon, do you have some time to stick around as we maybe take some phone calls from our people in the Zoom room right now?
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds awesome.
Okay, so those of you in the chat room right now, if you have anything to say, if you want to leave a comment, or if you have a question for Jaxon, just simply raise your hand. First, we go to Hansi here. Hansi, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's going on? I came in like 2 minutes late when this thing started, and I thought Cole Cabana was like on the show for a second, man. I'm not gonna lie to you, but no, I seriously though, what Jaxon was saying, man, I relate to a lot, and it also goes beyond wrestling, because I feel like a lot of people in the entertainment business, I think wrestling is like the more honest one about people trying to play characters even online, and I feel like it even went on into like other elements in social media, especially with like politics and also like the entertainment in general. Look at like the fiasco with Kanye West and all that. Like a lot of that's like enabled like to like play this character constantly to like and it's getting so out of control where like now that there's more danger to it with it becomes a sense of danger when you have your own cult. And if somebody is not using their fan base properly, people who just want to blindly support you and all that are going to like basically encourage, like without even realizing, encouraging you to kind of go more in that problematic behavior, because you're so like riding the high, and also the comments coming at you. You feel like you want to just go at every single person, and you don't even think logically. You think in the sense of what's going to be more entertaining, what's going to cause more of a buzz online. So a lot of the stuff that you were saying, man, I agree with you, and I think it goes on a lot more. And I think some people just don't want to like kind of like admit it. But I used to be one of those guys that used to like if like a celebrity was losing their mind or something like that, I never understood all of it. But like now that I kind of realize that like there's, because I've been through it with the Stern Show and all that, and I've been through it firsthand, and it took me to like realize that, and I was really in a bad place irrationally. I didn't care what I was saying politically incorrect or whatnot, because I was like, yo, fuck this world, I don't want to be here, and I'm gonna say whatever it takes so that someone can take me out. Like that's your mentality going in, because you really don't care, and you want to say the most problematic things. You want to be in the most irrational state because you feel like nobody actually gives a shit about you. And I found a good community in that, like maybe getting kicked off of the Stern Show was the best thing thing for me because it made me for the last like 5-6 years reevaluate shit. And now I come on like post wrestling most of the time. It's like the only place that I really kind of go to really, and I don't feel any pressure to like be this fucking character and all that. And and I've had like deep conversations with these guys on this show. So I just want to commend you for the work that you're doing. And again, guys, you guys have done amazing work as always, man. I always enjoy coming in here live. And I didn't want to do too much of you guys' time, but I just want to get off my chest. And Wayne knows how I've been. Like, he's talked to me for the last couple of months and seeing how I've improved from like the time before you may have interacted with me. So, I just want to say that, like, dude, you're doing a good job by bringing awareness to it. And I'll leave you guys with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
man.
contributing as always, Hansi. Yeah. I mean, honestly, at least for me, it's just we give what we get back. Or Hansi gets back what he gives to us. Honestly, he's been nothing but positive anytime he's tried to call on our show. So we just reflect that back to him. Do you have any thoughts or anything you'd like to say, either of you?
I was just gonna say that I hope it sounds like you're doing much better now, Hansi, and that's amazing to hear. It's cool to hear that the brief journey that you went through that transformation. So thanks for sharing that. And I appreciate the support and you listening, and yeah, amazing.
We go up next to
Much respect, Hansi.
We go up next to our man, Neil Flanagan. Neil, thank you for joining the Wellness Policy.
Hey guys, first of all, I just wanted to say, Jaxon, I think you've been an amazing guest today, incredibly articulate, and it sounds like the work that you're doing is invaluable. Jordan posted a clip from the closing of your fundraiser online yesterday, and even that short clip got me sort of pumped. I think you're a terrific communicator, and there's just something very deep about hearing someone sincere telling you that you're loved and that you're valued. It's even just on a clip on the internet rather than even in person. It's a powerful thing. But as you've said, also in your social media, you've got to do the work yourself as well. But I do have a question, and it's really for all three of you. And it's just very quick background is that I have some friends at a very local level, not any kind of fame, but who perform in bands or do open mic nights with comedy or that type of thing, performing basically. And a common thing that I hear from them and from people who are more in the public eye is that buzz of, in your case, Jaxon, going through the curtain and putting on a match, in your case, Jordan, performing with your band in front of an audience. In your case, Way, going live, perhaps on the news show, that buzz, or doing a Q&A in front of an audience, which you've done. And a common thing I hear is that maybe that's a high, it's a buzz, it's a wonderful feeling. And then the next day, there's generally a dip in the mood. And so the question really is, do you think that there's something unique about the world of entertainment, the world of putting yourself out there in front of a crowd and live, that is especially challenging, not just in wrestling, but across the board, to one's mental health? And thanks for a great show.
Thanks, Neil. Jaxon, would you like to start?
Yeah. Neil, amazing. Thank you for the compliment, by the way. It's one of the nicest things I've ever heard. It's beautifully said. It's very challenging because I think for the most part, performers, artists, creative types have a personality trait that's called openness to experience. And that causes a lot of different things because we are seeking that experience all of the time in different ways of life. And that could be from our performance or things that could be potentially more detrimental to us. And so I think it's important to first, you got to build this foundation about your life that is, when you come back to it, that you still feel this sense of joy and fulfillment, that you're not always seeking the next thing. But that's challenging because it is okay to have a come down after a show, right? If I go to Six Flags and I ride a bunch of rides, my adrenaline's pumping. When I get in the car and I go home, I'm going to be a little down because I was just on Superman for 15 minutes. That was awesome. And so the same thing is going to happen when we perform. We just have to know what we need to do to be able to get ourselves in the right frame of mind going into the next day, potentially if we have to go to our actual job or we have to be with our wife or our kids. So there has to be some work done there on some of these tools that I mentioned earlier about, being proactive about this personality trait, which is like openness to experience, more than like being reactive to all these different stimuli and allowing that to kind of spiral us out of control a bit. If that makes sense.
Yeah, certainly. I also think a lot of it is, what is our relationship to those experiences, to the audience, and maybe how much of a positive response we're dependent on to necessarily feel good about ourselves. I know when I was much younger, 18, 19, 20 years old, I was finding a lot of relative success in a band. It was a very popular band regionally. I could go to places in public and know that I'd be recognized. And that felt fucking good, because I always didn't feel good about who I was. So sometimes if I would go to something like a wedding and it was a bunch of new people and I knew none of them knew me for being this guy in a band, I would feel a bit more insecure and not as confident about meeting new people and telling the story of who I am, perhaps. So certainly at that time, the positive affirmation of being recognized and being celebrated for being an artist, I was much more dependent on that. And when I wasn't receiving that as regularly, that would cause me often to not feel as confident or good about myself. So certainly with all these things, it's a lifelong process. But I really changed. One, I invested heavily into just the relationship with myself and things like self-acceptance and self-love and whatnot. But then also as I began to perform again in bands a few years later, I really tried to be more intentional about my relationship to it. And I used to share with my brother, who I've performed with for much of my life, and other bandmates of, hey, like, these shows are fleeting, not only in the 30 to 60 minutes we're about to perform on stage, but just in general. Who knows if we're going to get another show after this? Like, nothing's guaranteed, and who knows how long these projects will last or not. But while we're up there, like, let's really be mindful. Let's really be appreciative. Like, let's really try to connect with each other on stage and the people on the floor, and just make the most of the moment as it is. Because, and as I've gotten older, I've realized more and more, these experiences of life are so precious. So precious. And it's still, playing in a band, it is by far my favorite experience of life. I love nothing more than performing. But I'm also at a point in life where I don't necessarily need it to feel good about myself or to feel satisfied with being alive. And that was really the biggest unlock for me.
For me, like, I think I'm a little different from the maybe the both of you in that, like, typically after a show, I feel relief that I didn't screw up. And in fact, like, starting any one of these sort of live broadcasts, I mean, I get nervous, just to make sure that I don't screw up. And afterwards is like where I can actually relax and, maybe kind of absorb perhaps, the goodness of the experience. But I think maybe, just hearing what Jordan said, like, some of that, I should probably be a bit more kind of like, present, when I'm doing the experience and so that I can actually enjoy it a bit more. But that's just to really kind of share perhaps my perspective of it all. But thank you for the question, Neil. I wanted to ask you, Jaxon, you kind of mentioned that there has at least been a bit more acceptance through social media about talking about mental health in the professional wrestling community. Are there certain things and events that have occurred over the past several years, I mean, that you would attribute it to it? I don't know how much wrestling you're actually following right now, but, do you have any thoughts on maybe contemporary wrestlers that might be leading the charge in this sort of discussion?
You mean like some wrestlers who are having like mental health conversations?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mentioned Mustafa Ali earlier. I
I'm curious if you've read the Eddie Kingston Players Tribune article.
Yes, I was just about to mention him, Eddie Kingston, and that article. Amazing. He's always been an open, honest, very real person. I think that's why everyone likes him. Same with Ali. It seems to be those two guys. And
what are your thoughts on, like, I don't know if you've followed like the Hangman Page championship win at all. But like, much of, I think, the basis of his particular character, and even with Eddie Kingston, with what he's doing with Chris Jericho right now, they are kind of bringing some of those self-confidence issues to light as part of their stories. And I think doing it in a way that is at least tasteful and authentic, and not just, like a cartoonish version of what it might have been several decades ago. What do you think about maybe like, professional wrestling storytelling now actually kind of broaching some of this?
I think that's amazing. I think that's amazing because if we want to be relatable as pro wrestlers, then we have to talk about these things, because everyone deals with insecurities and self-confidence issues and competing with other people and not feeling like you're good enough. All of these things are so common. That's why we're not alone, right? Because we have this common humanity of all of these deep struggles. And so I think putting it on a national platform where you have these guys going out there and performing at a really high level, but also saying that they feel this way, is really, really quite impactful. It's the same way that all these Olympians talking about their mental health struggles and still going out there and competing and getting after it, but saying that they're struggling and they need help and that it's okay to do this, okay to feel this way. All of these things, reduce the stigma so-and-so with mental health, and it makes it more common for people to talk about. And it also makes it okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with you at all for having a bad day or feeling insecure or lacking in self-confidence, or one day you just don't like your body and the way it looks. Like, that's okay. That's normal. Everyone goes through that. And I think people with higher platforms or Olympians or professional wrestlers sharing that and creating that art through a real storyline is deeply impactful, especially when it's done, I assume, like they're doing, with like some deep care and some of these nuanced details that go into people struggling with their mental health. And if Eddie Kingston's involved, then I'm sure it's amazing. And same with Adam Page, because I feel like those guys are like, real guys. Like, they're expressing their heart and soul every time they perform, and that's amazing. So yeah, I'm with that for sure.
To me, like, it's been like a real at least beginnings of sort of like a redefinition of I think what it means to be masculine. To have, like, like on the surface, you don't get a more guy type than an Eddie Kingston or John Moxley, and to hear guys like that have the courage to be vulnerable on national TV, to me, like, it makes that act seem more manly than, certainly hiding it and not mentioning it at all.
Absolutely, yeah. Asking for help is the manliest thing you can possibly do in the world. Manliest, asking for help, yeah. So, cheers.
So we've taken a lot of your time, Jaxon, and you've been fantastic. One more time, where's the best place for people to find more information about you and what you're providing?
Yeah, you can go to jacksonstone.net. That's a good place. Everything is there. You can find all my social handles. I'm really active on social media. I answer every single DM. So if you have a question, shoot it. And I also have a number that you can text on my Instagram. But if you're interested in You Are Loved, what we're doing, donations, merchandise, all of that stuff, if you want to email us or you have any questions or you need to find resources or support or any of that, because another thing we do at You Are Loved, besides the support groups, is we sponsor people's treatment. So if you can't afford your mental health care, whether that be medication, counseling, therapy, we will help you pay for that. It's super important. So if you're one of those people that may need help, you can reach out there. It's at youarelovedlife.com, and the social medias or handles are the same, You Are Loved Life. So those are the best places. So cheers.
We'll have his link tree linked in our show description, so you'll be able to find links to all of those things. Jordan, any final words for Jaxon before we talk about next month?
I'm just so thrilled that there are people like you out in the world. And again, that we have the tools and technology to so easily connect with one another. I love pro wrestling. It's one of the things I've always loved, and I'm also very deeply passionate, obviously, about mental health, given that one of my jobs in the world is that of a licensed mental health professional. And to find people like you in the world, Jaxon, that are like equally as passionate and committed and skilled in ways that you can actualize some of these visions you have for yourself of bringing mental health advocacy and awareness, but also to your point, like real community building and actionable experiences where you're bringing mental health and the pro wrestling community together. It's really deeply affirming. Clearly, it's been one of my goals and one of the reasons why this show exists. When I was working within pro wrestling with an organization, it was hard for me to find my place. I would have plenty of conversations with wrestlers in particular who kind of knew what I did, and we would sometimes just have casual chats about it. But I never really found a lane to really kind of do what you're doing and really making it come to life in a much clearer and consistent way. I assume there are many more either out there that are interested in both, and perhaps conversations like the ones we're having today helps give them a sense of either permission or just validation that these types of conversations are possible. If you are listening to this week or 5 years from now on your phone or YouTube or whatever, full permission to reach out to us, because we need more of us to do this. I mean, pro wrestling is a community, and it's in the power of community in which we can actually create real, sustainable, positive cultural change. So much respect and appreciation for you, Jaxon.
Thank you. Yeah, that's means a lot to me, and I'm excited to do more work with you, Jordan, and see what we can conjure up together. And Wei, you're beautiful. Thank you so much for having me. And I love this conversation. This was a lot of fun for me. So thank you.
And I look forward to part
dude.
2 at some point. You know, as your career develops, I'm very curious to see how much more you're able to achieve in the months and years to come. Jordan, what are we talking about next month here in the April edition of the Wellness Policy?
Oh, we can announce this, yes, Wei?
I think so.
You're teeing me up.
Yeah.
Jaxon, you smoke weed?
Not regularly.
Okay, well, April is 420, of course. I believe the third Thursday when we typically do these episodes would be 421. So in the spirit of that, it's something that I've been nudging Wei to do for many months at this point. We will be talking about cannabis. Mm-hmm. And we have a guest. Can we announce the guest, Wei?
We can announce the guest, absolutely. Yeah. This, first of all, it's an interesting topic to me. It's not one that I would have initially thought about for this particular podcast, but because Jordan, you have maybe perhaps been a bit more involved in that whole world lately, and because like I actually have like surprisingly a bit of a connection to that world as well with this person. I think we'll have an interesting conversation. I'm not at all an active smoker, but this person certainly is, and his name is Damian Abraham of Fucked Up. Those of you who, of course, listen to our podcast will know. He actually has done plenty in the industry as far as coverage on Vice, and also just daily. I guess as part of his pastime, I suppose. So I look forward to the conversation. Jordan, perhaps. What sort of an angle will we be taking, you think? Because I don't think we're just going to be here, I don't know, like that 70s show style, like roundtable, just, giggling. Like, what kind of a show do you think this will be for on a show about cannabis?
Well, I mean, look, certainly medical marijuana now exists as a cultural or scientific construct. So there's certainly evidence suggesting that weed has wellness effects. I think for thousands of years, many cultures and communities globally have come to know this. So that's certainly one angle. Obviously, we can dig into socio-political and cultural kind of and legal perhaps ramifications or the evolution of it, which certainly impacts the mental health of individuals and communities. I know from personal experience that some specific experiences of smoking weed, I would argue, has dramatically changed me emotionally, spiritually, intellectually, for the better. And I would argue all of that significantly contributed to my mental health and well-being. So I feel like, as long as you're willing to chat about this stuff within the context of a show like The Wellness Policy, I'm happy to do it.
All right, I'm looking forward to it. So that is it for this month. Follow him at Jordan Beatwell. Follow me at Way0937. If you enjoy the show, share the YouTube video, share the link in the Post Wrestling Cafe. Let people know that they can join us once a month here, or just listen to the show afterwards. So until next time, thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Yes, Limp Bizkit is back, baby.